society, and it is punished when it is detected. Along with the other measures we shall take are the incentives. It is clear that many of our security people guarding our borders, standing in rain while we are asleep at night, retire after 27 years with a meager package of not more than 27,000 Ghana cedis. This obviously is not enough when our parliamentarians walk away with 80,000 cedis after 4 years service.
Thank you, Dr. Sakara. Let me go to Mr. Hassan Ayaga of the PNC.
Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. Our dear nation has enjoyed peace and security over the past 2 decades, thanks to the vigilance of our security services. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate our men and women in uniform for a good job done. Well, when I am elected as president, I will ensure that the peace and security that the nation enjoys is consolidated and strengthened by putting in place the following measures. Before that, in Ghana, only a segment of the population is living in peace and security. The majority of the persons are living in various degrees of insecurity. The rich build walls, tall walls, around their houses, add barbed wires, and add electrical fences. Then additional rare 20 dogs and high private security for their gate men. I will fight crime through many measures. The first measure is to modernize and re-equip the armed forces and the police and other security agencies with the latest weapon and hardware to enable them to perform more effectively and efficiently. We will bring back the border guards concept, equip them to police our borders and all entry points, increase the number of police personnel to the ratio of 1 police officer to 300 people. We will also provide and deploy the most advanced closed-circuit monitoring system at all the country's entry point and government establishment to further enhance the work of security agencies. But we all are involved in maintaining peace and controlling crimes. It is not just the security as individuals in your homes and houses. When you see burglary going on, somebody in another person's house, if you cannot control it, you just inform the police. We will put up telephone lines free of charge that people could easily access the police, so that when we equip them with the modern vehicles, like the NDC have done, we will continue to give them more and more equipped other vehicles to support them, and they will be able to control crime in more than 24 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ayarga. Let me go to the MPP's Nana Akufo-Addo.
Thank you very much, Kojo. And let me say good evening to everybody here and to fellow Ghanaians. The question you've asked is a question of great importance for the lives of our people. The security of everyday life is probably the most fundamental requirement of any citizen in any society. And our people have been confronted recently with significant increases in crime, robbery especially. I'm surprised to hear the statement that the statistics indicate that there's been a drop. I wonder whether it is like the single-digit inflation, that there is a disconnect between the figures and the reality on the ground. Most people will be astonished to hear that. Armed robbery is on the increase. And it makes a mockery of the claim that was made that armed robbery would become a thing of the past, which was promised by the NDC in the 2008 election. Be that as may. Clearly, we're dealing with a matter that requires a very comprehensive response. A response about the strengthening of the institutions that have the frontline duty of combating crime, talking, of course, there principally of the police. I have been, and I continue, and our party continues to be, for a rapid expansion of the numbers of our police service. We have a ratio of 1 to 1,200 in our country. when the UN benchmark talks of 1 to 500. So that's an area that we can do something about immediately. And by increasing the strength of the police service, of course, also enhancing their capability, giving them better and more well-resourced tools to carry out their work. The police cry that they don't have fuel for their vehicles when you call upon them. It's not something that should be allowed to continue. So that's one. Secondly, obviously, the other aspect of law enforcement, that is the Ministry of Justice as well as the judiciary, equally need to be strengthened for them to be able to work more efficiently and more effectively. We're then dealing also with what we need to do to expand our economy, because an expanded economy and an enhanced economy will mean that the resort to armed robbery and to crime, hopefully, will diminish. That connection has been made in other parts of the world, and it's a connection that we can make here as well. Focus also on what we need to do to improve the living standards of our people, enhance their living standards, and in that process, I'm also certain that we will come to better grips with the issue of crime in our country.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much for your responses on crime. We are still on governance, and we'll move to the second question. And I'll begin with Dr. Abu Sakara of the CPP. The second question. All right. There is a general perception that corruption permeates nearly every facet of Ghanaian society. For example, the public service, the justice system, and even the political establishment and the media. Specifically, the question is this: what steps would you take to address this problem?
Thank you. The first thing is to strengthen the institutions themselves. The issue of corruption is pervasive because it is difficult to detect, and it also becomes part of a habit and attitudinal changes. Therefore, we have to have mechanisms in place first to detect it. This is why I suggested that we will have a complaints committee set up that in offices and public places where people can go to first make complaints. Thereafter, the Whistleblowers Act, which we have put in place but not empowered because we do not give anonymity, we do not give security. We'll make sure that those things are in place to ensure that when people make complaints, they are not the ones who get punished. And this is very important to the detection of corruption. We will also ensure that the Procurement Act and also measures which are put in place for disbursement of funds in public institutions are tightened up. First of all, the issue of decentralization is important to decentralize even the corruption. Because when it is all left in the center, it is of gargantuan proportions. But if we decentralize the funds for implementation to the local level, where people can see what the money is meant for, and have a measure of holding the public officers accountable, we will reduce the incidence of crime and corruption. That is one of the measures we shall put in place. Furthermore, we will ensure that we take steps to recover the perceived benefits of corruption. If people are left with the benefits of corruption, it is an incentive. If we take measures to recover those assets and bring them back to the public purse, then it will give less opportunity and less incentive for people to be involved in corruption. We also will do things that protect our security forces themselves. We live in a community where everybody knows what everybody does. And to enforce the law is almost to become a pariah. We need to educate people and change the public awareness around that attitude, so that when people are enforcing the law, they're not seen to be the pariahs and the wrongdoers. Rather, they should be encouraged and praised. Finally, I think the attitudes of children who see gains in corruption need to be stopped at an early stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to Mr. Hassan Ayariga of PNC, please.
I have not access to the National Anti-Corruption Plan, so I cannot comment directly on it. However, let me state my view on corruption. All the four of us here, sitting here, says we are against corruption. Yes, we know corruption is inimical to national development, and all Ghanaians must speak and act against it. Corruption takes several forms: political patronage, slaves, kickbacks on contracts, inflated contract prices, nepotism, and all these are acts of corruption, which Hassan Ayariga will not countenance as a president. Yes, we have institutions like SHRAC, EOCO, Integrated Initiative, etc., committed to the fight against corruption. These institutions must be resourced, and the PNC government will do more than what the other parties are promising in this respect. However, beyond supporting this institution, I feel as president, you can best fight corruption by leading by example. My father, Nana, was in the MPP government when President Kufuor defended corruption that it started from Adam. This Kufuor's principle translated to chop, make I chop. You cannot lead the fight against corruption with this mentality. When I say I will lead by example, I mean that I will be truthful. You can speak the truth, you can fight corruption, and if you know even the senior high school is not possible, yet you promise it, you are being untruthful, and you are prone to corruption. If you hide things about yourself, and you come to tell us different things, it's also corruption. We will also strengthen the state institution with fighting corruption, so to as that they investigate and punish all persons engaged in corruption. Let me state one few things. Mala Isa, as you know, I will not ask my party, I will not talk so much about it, but I will tell you one thing that the MPP government did in prosecuting the PNC man when many other cases were sitting and dismissed, and we could not even find dockets, and they were missing in the Attorney General office, where my senior brother or my father was the Attorney General. So Hassan Ayariga is saying, in dealing with corruption, the laws will be no respectable of persons. Simple and short. Hassan Ayariga will not keep companies with drug dealers, alone appoint them as advisors. Let me emphasize that my point of leadership, by example, is crucial in the fight against corruption.
Thank you very much.
In all forms of government and public offices.
Thank you very much. Now we move to the MPP, Nana Akufo-Addo.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Madam Moderator, I think that this is one of the most important matters confronting the development of our country. How we can bring corruption under control, reduce, and finally eliminate it from our body politic. I see the beginning from the example that the leader will give. If you are committed to the fight against corruption, you yourself, of course, must not be corrupt. You yourself should be somebody who can take on the fight because you're not corrupt, have never been, and will not be. That is the position in which I stand. Not being corrupt, never will be, and have not been. That's the first thing. Secondly, we need also to strengthen the institutions that have to deal with matters of corruption. Once again, obviously the police and the other agencies that now exist in our republic, the SHRAG, the EOCO, and the rest. My own belief is that the remit of SHRAG on the issue of corruption is too large, their remit generally, and that there is a need for us to have a dedicated anti-corruption agency that will deal with it. Thirdly, the legislative framework. And nobody did a better job in putting the legislative framework in place to deal with corruption than the government of J.A. Kufuor. The Whistleblowers Act, the Procurement Law, the Financial Administration Act, all of these are the legal basis that have been put in place to make the fight against corruption easier. One of the big things is that the first time that the Whistleblowers Act was implemented, the whistleblowers, contrary to the spirit and the intention of the law, were the ones who found themselves in trouble. Dismissed from the civil service, they had to go to court to fight to bring their way. That clearly did not send a good signal about the fight for corruption in the NDC. We have had a series of events that have alarmed our nation. The most, of course, are these very famous, dubious judgment debts that have been paid out in the last few years. Large sums of money, payment of which are very questionable and whose basis many people in Ghana question as examples of high-level corruption. We know about the petty corruption that exists within the bureaucracy. There's a need to deal with it, and we deal with it by simplifying the rules and make it easier. But it is the mega corruption that we have seen in recent times that have become the bane of our society and which we need to do something about. We need to work in such a way that the leadership of our country will not countenance certain types of conduct, and that people will be ready to apply sanctions and punishment where it is necessary.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. We now move to the President and Presidential candidate for the NDC.
Thank you very much. I'll begin by just making a comment on something Honorable Nana Akufo-Addo said to do with judgment debts. Judgment debts properly are debts that are adjudicated by courts of competent jurisdiction. And so judgment debts themselves cannot be said to be an act of corruption. It is what causes judgment debts that we must be tackling. The frivolous cancelling of contracts. What is it that triggers people to think they have a claim against government? That is what we should be looking at. But to look at the symptom rather than the cure, I think for a person who has such legal training, I think is a bit misread. I can understand that if we are desperate to win political power, we take any instrument and we use it against our political opponents. But let me say that much of the corruption in Ghana is anecdotal. Government alone cannot fight corruption. It takes all our people to fight it. We must not just rumor corruption. We must be prepared to stand against corruption. And I think that that is one area in which we are lacking. Our political parties, our civil society organizations, individuals, everybody likes to say, I think this person is corrupt, this person has done this, but they are not prepared to hold the person's feet to the fire. And that's one of the attitudes we must change if we are to make any progress with corruption. Because corruption is something that the giver and the taker or whoever benefits is not going to come and say, I've indulged in this. Whoever is aware that something like that has happened should be prepared to stand up to it. But the things we need to do, which we have done over the past, the previous government did it, that is true, putting legislation in place. We have come to continue with that. And I have said, given a personal commitment, that the day Parliament passes the Freedom of Information Bill, the day it lands on my desk, I will sign it into law. I think that other issues such as the Public Officers Accountability Bill, which is we're waiting to put into legislation, reviewing the charge law to allow the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice to be able to independently investigate cases of corruption rather than wait for a complaint to be made is one of the issues that I'll take up as, in my next term as presidency. Expanding resourcing of the anti-corruption agencies, which we are doing. We've increased the funding to TRAJ. Indeed, IOCO has seen a 300% increase in financing in terms of personnel. Also, personal leadership. I will lead by example in terms of corruption, deal strongly with people who are corrupt in my government. Decentralization is one of the issues I was going to raise. My brother raised it. When you have an over-centralized system, it makes it more corrupt. If you decentralize and send the resources to the local level, there's better supervision. Sting operations like ANAS has been doing, we need to involve the judiciary to see how it can be accepted as evidence in our courts. Unfortunately, we don't have that environment. And so when you do sting operations, it's very difficult to present that evidence before a court
Thank you
of law.
so much for your response. All of you want a rebuttal?
Please.
You have one.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Madam Moderator, I'm beginning to believe that the President's memory on some matters is, I don't know how to put it, but it lacks something. He appears to have forgotten that the government itself today has gone to court accusing Mr. Albert Wyoming of having perpetrated a fraud on the state in the judgment debt that he received. The government, in fact, is in court prosecuting him on the ground of fraud and is also in court asking for a refund of the money. Now, these are not speculations. This is not a question of judgment debts properly so-called. These are dubious judgment debts. They are questionable payments that the government itself has acknowledged. And as we sit now, there are two pending actions in courts of competent jurisdiction, evidencing that something seriously went wrong in the payment of 51 million Ghana cedis for somebody who did no work for it. Can you imagine what those monies would do in terms of building schools and hospitals? These 400 odd schools, primary schools, could have been built with this money. The reality is that the judgment debts that have become the subject of controversy in our country are not the normal judgment debts that we're talking about. That there appears to have been official collusion to take monies out of our treasury and pay it to people who were not deserving of those payments. So I'm glad also to hear today the President talking about the need to provide evidence. His predecessor lambasted the former President D.A. Kufuor when he made that statement that he would not countenance that the minute an allegation is made, he would investigate it. I believe that that should be the position of this
Thank
government.
you very much.
Thank you.
Your time for rebuttal is up. Thank you. You want another rebuttal?
Yes, thank you.
Please.
We have now finished one term of the Mills administration, and we finished 2 terms of the Kufuor administration. All through this time, we were assured that the Freedom of Information Bill will be passed, and it has not been passed. I would like to know who is holding it up, where, and how, and why. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your responses to corruption. You want a rebuttal?
Yes,
Please, you have
I just want to clarify, use it to clarify this issue. The point I'm making is, what are the sources of those judgment debts? Indeed, if you profile the debts, most of the claims on contracts and agreements that have been breached have come from the previous administration, and we are having to deal with that problem. And so if you look just at the symptom, yes, it's true, somebody can use the system and fraudulently claim judgment debts. And that is realized, and if it's realized, government goes uptight and must retrieve its money. And government has taken that action by hauling the person to court. But the point I keep making is that we must look at the frivolous cancellation of government contracts. When political parties come into power, every contract that was signed by the previous government is suspect and subject to change. With regards to the Freedom of Information Bill, we considered it in Cabinet. We approved it nearly 1.5 years ago. It is the property of Parliament, and I urge Parliament to quickly pass it. I think that a country where we can have better access to information would be a country that is empowered to fight corruption. And so if we have the Freedom of Information Act in place, media, individuals, everybody can go apply for the relevant information. And if they have access to more information, then that means that a lot of this speculation about corruption and so on and so forth might be allayed before they even become a problem. I want to also indicate that we have made progress with the Transparency Index. The only way of determining corruption, because people won't come and admit they've been corrupt, is to look at what the perception of it is. And as of today, it stands at 3.9. As president, I'm going to work to make that even better and send it to the highest possible number.
Clearly, the subject of corruption is very important.
Very.
And I can tell from the rebuttals and interventions that it is so, even for you, as I believe for all of us in this room. And therefore, I have a follow-up question. There exists a national anti-corruption plan. And I've heard you, PNC, to say you are not privy to it. But this follow-up question is for all of you, beginning with CPP. That there's this plan that exists, and it seems stuck between the executive and the legislature. I would like to hear from you what your commitment would be towards implementing it, CPP.
First of all, we have always advocated for a separation of the Minister of Justice's office from the Attorney General's office, so as to reduce possibilities for conflict of interest and empower the Attorney General to be able to independently prosecute cases. We are of the opinion that if this channel will not work, then we should strengthen further Shiraj to be able to